All right, what's going on, Soul Fam? Welcome to Mira D Tarot. I am Mira D here today to talk to y'all about something a little bit different than I normally speak about. So today, I usually talk about tarot cards, and I usually talk about those birds are going crazy. I usually talk about tarot cards, and I usually talk about the astrology reports, but today I want to talk more about something that's very personal to me, and I want to talk about my experience with the medicine ayahuasca. A lot of people have heard of this, a lot of people have not heard of it. It is a plant medicine from the Amazon that is used, I don't know if it's just specifically native to the Amazon, but I know that it's used in a lot of indigenous cultures to be able to take you into the spiritual realm, to be able to heal ailments of the soul and things like that. So it is called ayahuasca, which means vine of the soul or vine of souls, and it is a very, very conscious plant medicine that takes you deep within yourself to do healing that is so crazy and so profound. So I want to talk a little bit about what my experience, what my life was like before ayahuasca, the general experience of ayahuasca, and then leading on up to what's been transpiring over the past year or so, and how I've been affected by these things and everything. So I'm really excited to share this story with y'all. It's been a very personal thing, so I feel like I'm ready. A lot of people are like, oh, what happened to you? Just over the course of a few months, I was with this one person. I left St. Louis, Missouri in August, still drinking severely and having a severe alcohol problem and things like that, and lots of anxiety. And I show back up in December as this whole different person. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this experience and stuff. So firstly, ayahuasca. How did I find out about it? How did I become interested in it? Now, a lot of places, a lot of people, and people say that the medicine finds you when it's ready. And, when you live in a regular world where we don't think of plants as conscious, we think of them as alive, but we don't think of them as conscious the way that, we are. We don't think of them as having souls in the same way as, a human being does and stuff like that. How can something find us? We don't think about that. We're so used to, in our society, chasing and going and getting and, going after and grinding for things that we forget that we are magnets, and that the universe is always listening, and that the universe is always bringing things to us for our highest good and our growth in that moment. Now, whether we're open and receptive enough to those signs and symbols is a whole different thing, but the universe is always speaking to us, is always keeping us in a place where we're in order and where we're lively and where we're capable of being healthy, And so we forget about these things. And so I heard about ayahuasca a long time ago, I don't know, just through passing, through the groups of friends that I used to do psychedelics with and stuff like that, through, I've eaten mushrooms and done LSD and things like that before. And I smoked a little bit of DMT at one point. But it was, I always felt like it was medicinal, but a lot of the people that I was around and stuff like that used it more for partying and things like that. And so I always felt kind of I always have had a connection to the spirits of plants and things. But that's neither here nor there. Let me get back on the subject. So hearing about ayahuasca and stuff like that, I never had an initial attraction to it. To me, it was just oh yeah, that sounds crazy, but whatever. I just didn't have this, there wasn't a calling to it for me. I knew about it. I have friends that talked a lot about it and stuff like that. They had read these crazy books about it and seen these crazy documentaries about it and stuff like that, but I had never personally gained an interest in it myself. So years go by, 6, 7, 8 years. I leave a awful relationship. I was prone to, back in the day, I was prone to relationships that were with narcissists and everything like that. I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of depression. I suffered with self-abuse. I suffered with borderline personality. I was diagnosed with bipolar. I had all of these issues going on and things like that. I used to cut myself back when I was way younger and stuff like that. And then as I got older and stuff like that, I got better at these things. I healed through these things. I transmuted these things, but there were still lots of things that were still going on within me. I had issues with my worth. I had trouble using my voice because as a child, I was never really allowed to voice or vocalize how I feel or how I felt and things like that. I was always told what to do. I was always hushed on what to feel. And so growing up as an adult, I had no concept of what it was to make a decision because I was always told what to do. I had no concept of what it was to step into a world where I have a voice. I would always preface everything that I said and everything with, oh, well, it's probably not that important, but, and then I would speak something, but I was speaking in a very quiet voice. Now I'm learning, like now in my life, that my voice has, and even earlier in childhood, before my voice was taken away, I have learned that my voice is my superpower. I am a singer, I'm a rapper, I'm a speaker, I'm a writer. I am all of the things that come through this vessel is the way that I'm able to help touch the world and things like that. I mean, there are other gifts and stuff that I have as well, but to have that taken away and then given back to you is such a very powerful experience. It makes you appreciate things rather than take them for granted. So a little bit about my life and stuff like that. I was raised in a household where, as I said, I wasn't allowed to speak the things that I felt. I was raised with a mother who was very, very controlling. I was raised with a mother who was very, very manipulative. So when you put those two things together, it creates a feeling within myself and everything. It created a feeling within myself that I had that I wasn't lovable, that I wasn't good enough, and that created a feeling that I needed to conform to and become whatever other people wanted me to be. However, the conflict with that is that as a child, and even as a teenager and stuff, I never knew how to do this. So it manifested as a feeling and a battle between me and my mom of her trying to turn me into something. And I mean, it's not just her though. This is what our society is built on. This is what our society is based on. We look at children and we think that children need to be turned into something. They need to be molded into something rather than looking at them and saying, hey, this is who they are. Let me figure out how to nurture the natural part of them, the natural being that is sitting here and existing with us right now, And so that being said, let me check my phone real quick because sometimes people call and it interrupts it. Oh, sweet. No callers. All right. So that being said, I stepped into this place of myself where just growing up I was always very motivated, but I also felt like an outsider, just based on my programming and things like that. And I mean, I feel like this is a lot of people's stories though, just in different ways, and that's just it. I suffered a lot of different types of emotional abuse, mental abuse, manipulation, physical types of abuse and stuff at times as well. And so getting older and things like that, I fought my hardest to not be that person, to not be in that space. However, as the way that the subconscious mind works is that when we are, the way that we see things as a child programs us as to how that's supposed to look in our lives. So to me, what love looked like in my life growing up was, everybody was in relationships, but all of the men were very abusive to their wives. My uncle would always beat up his wife and things like that. And I have one of my biggest memories of my is of my uncle acting a fool and setting himself on fire in the front yard butt naked or something like that because his wife pissed him off or something or other, and so this is what I grew up looking at. I grew up realizing three things. One thing is that love looked like abuse, and it looked like sticking around during abuse. And then I also learned that love was also something that you had to fight for, that you had to bend yourself for, and that is something that you wouldn't get if you weren't, if you didn't become who somebody else wanted you to be. I also learned that sticking around in situations that made you uncomfortable and that you didn't like, and being there for people and putting yourself second and taking care of others was before yourself. That was what love meant. And so growing up, and stepping into situations, I became the person who gave for everybody, and I didn't know my value or my worth outside of that. I didn't know who I was without any of these things, and so fast forwarding and stuff like that, turned into a teen. I got pregnant when I was 14, had a kid when I was 15, dropped out of school, started culinary school when I was 16, started culinary college when I was 16, became a person who motivationally spoke to other teen moms and things like that as I moved up the ladder very quickly in the restaurant as a baker, as a cake decorator, as a chef. I became a person who was motivated, and this was all fine and good, but sometimes we don't realize how things are affecting us until we are hit with the other side of that, and so when you're presented with a relationship, now you can see the reflections of what trauma has hit you in the realm of relationships. So that being said, I went through all these things, some really abusive relationships, mentally, physically. A lot of my relationships mimicked my need to prove that I was good enough to receive love. And like, I didn't realize this until way later in life, but my relationships were based in, I would always say I could find the nicest guy in the world or the nicest girl in the world, and I would like be like, whatever, like, I wouldn't stick with them. But the one person that treated me like crap would be the person that I would stick around with, because there was this fight in myself, this need subconsciously to prove that I was good enough to be with this person, to prove to them that I was good enough. And so it came with us. So what did I attract? I attracted a lot of narcissistic people, a lot of controlling people, and a lot of people who reminded me exactly of my relationship with my mom. My dad's a different story and everything. I'll get into talking about him a little bit later. He's a really amazing guy, but he did end up leaving early on, and then planned on coming back to fix the damage and stuff like that. But by that time, I got to hang out with him for about 2 years, and then he passed. But anyway, so leading up to this, and this is all very important, I developed like a super serious addiction with drinking and alcoholism, because I did not learn how to, it's the only way I learned how to socialize and how to cope with things as a teenager. And so my drinking habit was deeply rooted in the subconscious area of acceptance. And then I have a family history on both sides of my family of alcoholism. So the thing to note about that is that the torch is always being passed. Like, we're being given this torch, and it's being passed down from our ancestors and stuff too. So we're still healing. Not only are we on our own journey, but we're also on a journey to healing that which they weren't able to complete. Perfect example is that my dad moved to the East Coast to to get himself together so that he could come back and stuff like that for us when he was ready. And I moved to the East Coast as well, and I was able to get myself together and in order so that I could come back here and be with my children. So so that's that. So I have 2 children, by the way. I have an 8-year-old and a 17-year-old. I'm 32. That's always everybody's next question. So anyway, with the plant medicine, once I moved to Boston, I finally decided that I had enough of these relationships and this cycle. I had no idea how to get out of it, because that's the thing about being in situations where being raised in certain situations is that when you haven't ever seen something done before, you have to get really creative on how to do it. And the way that you get creative is you decide, hey, this is what's going to work, and then you mess it up real bad. And then you decide, hey, this is going to work, and then you mess it up again. You have to learn through trial and error. When you don't have that basis or that background, and you don't know what it looks like, and you're the first person to step out and do this in your realm, in your reality, then you have to get creative, and you have to step out into this version of yourself and everything and mess up a bunch of times. So that is essentially how I learned and I am grateful for it, very grateful for it today, because I have the experience, not just a book that I read. I have the experience to know what works in my life and what doesn't, and it has given me a lot of wisdom. So moving forward from that and everything, I moved to Boston, and a friend of mine on the West Coast over in California, her and I we're talking about trying to go to Peru to do an ayahuasca ceremony and everything, but things just didn't align. I was still struggling. I was struggling less with alcohol in Boston, but it would come in spurts. So whereas here I was drunk all day, every day, waking up in the middle of the night, taking shots, rationing out my shots to make sure that I had enough to get through the morning till the liquor store opened again, showing up at the liquor store 3 or 4 times a day, because if I bought a fifth, that fifth would be gone. I would drink that fifth until I passed out. I got into other other drug use and stuff like that too, recreationally, which was Molly and Coke on some occasions and things like that. And so delving into this world, it really, even in this space, it didn't feel like me. But also in this space, I still was able to shine part of my soul. I became a comedic rapper in that point in time and everything, and did shows. I became an artist. I discovered a lot of parts of myself in that, but the parts of myself that were trying to shine, but they were still buried and burdened and things like that. And so a friend of mine, we were talking about going to Peru to do ayahuasca, but things didn't align. All of a sudden this interest sparked in me. It was whoa, ayahuasca, I want to I need to go try that. I need to go be a part of that. I need to go to a ceremony. And so this came to me, and as it came to me and everything, it was this drive, this urge, this all of a sudden thing where I felt like I had to do it. There was like a calling in my soul. Whereas before, like I had known about it forever, but like before it didn't have that same type of pull. So I'm like, trying to get there. I at one point didn't have enough money to get to Peru, and then my buddy, like, she didn't get approved for a passport, and like, there's a lot of things, like things just weren't aligning. And so finally I said, you know what, forget it. I'm just gonna let things happen naturally and continue to do the inner self work that I've been doing and stuff since I've moved to Boston. And so I get to Boston, and like, I'm just continuing about my life. About 8 months down the line, 8 months after deciding to initially having the 8 months after initially having the interest in ayahuasca, 8 months after initially having the interest in ayahuasca, I decided to I decided to move. It was a calling in my soul as well, that I needed to be somewhere different, that Boston had done all the healing it could do for me. I was there for about 2 years, and I was like, it's time to go somewhere else. And it's a crazy thing, because when people ask like, oh, well, why'd you move here? Why'd you move there? The answer is always, I'll tell you in 6 months. A friend of mine coined that, but it's always, I'll tell you in 6 months, because I don't know why I'm supposed to be places, but I just know in my soul that I'm supposed to be somewhere, and that's something that I need for growth or whatever, or like something that I'm supposed to be doing is there. And so I go from there, and I stop in Georgia first, which I did not follow my soul on that one. And then from Georgia, I stayed in Georgia for about a month, and it's just really wild how all these things aligned so that I could show up in California. And so my friend, the same one that I had been talking about doing a ceremony with, my old rap buddy, my old rap partner, so she invited me out to California, into the mountains, and she was like, hey, you should come stay with me for a little bit, like, just how, like, stay with me for like a month or so. And I'm like, okay. And so I get to California, and within 3 days of my arrival in California, it just so happened that one of the girls in the mountain which was right down the road from us, she used to work on a retreat. Okay, she used to work on a retreat in Brazil, and the shamans that she used to work for happened to be passing through the mountains that week with the medicine. So when I say Mother Aya found me, she did. When I say she found us, and my buddy goes, should we do it? I'm like, what? She found us. Of course we should. And I was broke to the dime broke. And the day of the ceremony, I got paid exactly $200, which is exactly how much it cost to do the ceremony. So when I say that I was divinely guided, I was divinely called, and this is a part of my mission, and that when it is your time, you will know. I speak very, very truthfully on that one. So I just want to share that part of my before